You're listening to the Otis Jiry channel.
Chapter 14. Breakthrough. For many weeks to follow, all suggestions as to a way of solving this problem were discussed. Mark had decided that it might be a wise move to confide in his Uncle David, and Jane agreed. She knew how close they had been when Mark was growing up, and that certainly if he couldn't be trusted, then no one could. Mark and Jane's positions at the hospital were kept open. Dr. Carlston was very highly thought of, and as they had important information which could lead the police to the killers, it was decided upon by the Board of Governors to be of prime importance to allow time for leads to be followed up. It was also regarded as a period of sick leave for both of them to recover from the psychological and physical traumas they had been through, especially Mark. As far as the hospital and the police were concerned, this whole business was a nasty kidnapping and murder which had somehow revolved around the hit and run of the mysterious patient. They were not told about the link to the Secret Services. David proved to be extraordinarily helpful and understanding, although it took him some while to comprehend the amazing turn of events explained in great detail to him. The very idea of an atom bomb concealed somewhere beneath the Kremlin was so amazing that he would not have believed it had it not been for Mark's incredible feat at building his dream recorder and the details of the abduction and the secret laboratory. David knew of no reason at all for him to have made up this incredible story, fully backed up by Jane's contribution to the facts. Then came a stroke of luck which was to provide them with enough evidence to allow them to continue their quest. A news item, carried by one of the daily papers, from a political reporter in New York proved most interesting to David. It read, "Young woman, late 20s, gunned down in Manhattan Street early today. New York Police Department following a tip-off that she may have been targeted as a Russian agent. Her attackers were driving a red Mercedes saloon, later found abandoned. Woman seriously injured under police protection at unnamed hospital." Could this possibly be the agent Fraser had met? Another assassination attempt to prevent a key agent from speaking? It was a long shot, especially as Mark couldn't remember the face on the tape clearly. Jane came up with a solution. "We don't have to remember what she looked like," she confidently stated. "How else could we know she was the agent?" Mark asked. "Easy. I kept the videotape with her face, and it had those murky images of that tunnel place on it as well." "You mean you deliberately kept a piece of evidence which could have got us both killed?" Mark shouted. "Brilliant!" he beamed. "Where is it?" Jane made her way to Mark's father's library and came back clutching a book, except it wasn't a book. To Mark and David's surprise, concealed within the dust cover was a video cassette. She explained that she felt so guilty for keeping it that she had hidden this very special book in amongst the hundreds of others. Excitedly, Mark pulled out the recorder from under the TV table and blew away the accumulated dust, placing the cassette in the machine and setting it to play. The recorded sequences had been suitably slowed down at source to produce images on the screen, remaining long enough to study on still frame. He hoped this was the tape with the very clear image of the girl. It was. Jane had particularly selected this recording due to the clarity of the images, especially because of the girl's face sequence. "Did you keep just the one tape out of all we collected?" asked Mark curiously. "Yes, of course, because the girl's face must have been important to Fraser. Otherwise he wouldn't have been thinking of it so often," explained an enthusiastic Jane. "This tape had really clear pictures of her, so I kept it," she exclaimed proudly. After a while, that clear-faced image appeared on the screen. "If that is the same girl who was shot in New York, then we're on to something," added David. David's latest toy, as Rosemary put it, was a rather odd-looking Polaroid camera. After a few adjustments on the camera and to the still frame facility on the video machine to get a good image, David took a series of exposures to record the face at its best. "There we are," he said, offering the pictures for Mark to see. "They're not too bad, are they? The details come out well enough to recognize her." Uncle David carefully packed away the camera and put it back up into the cupboard. "Right," said David. "The big question now is, are we taking these pictures over to New York to somehow find the girl? I suppose with the help of the police, as they're guarding her." Mark looked doubtful. "It's a chance too good to throw away, as it might be her. If we don't check it out now, while we roughly know where she is, it would be too much to live with the not knowing," pointed out Jane. "But Jane, how the hell are we going to afford to go over to New York on this long shot?" said Mark, still looking doubtful. Alice was sitting over in the corner of the room, looking out of the window toward the summer house. "I've got a few thousand stashed away," she said. "Use that." All heads turned to where Alice was sitting. They didn't realize that she understood what they were talking about. She usually let conversation drift over her head these days. "Alice," said Jane comfortingly, "we couldn't use that. It's put by for your old age, for a rainy day, as they say." "Don't be ridiculous, girl," she snapped. "I am old. This is my old age." She looked up out the window and laughed. "And it is a rainy day." It was a rare occasion for Alice to laugh, and they all laughed with her. David made a suggestion. "If we let Alice just pay for half the costs, I'll pay the rest. Things have been going quite well just lately on the business side of things, and I'm certainly not short of a bit of the old cash just now. Shall we do it like that, then? What do you think?" He turned to Mark, who was still worried. "I feel guilty about this money. I'm the one who should be footing the bill for the journey. But the truth is we've hardly a penny at the moment with both of us away from work, and I'm also having to pay the rent on the flat while we're away. Otherwise we'd have nothing to go back to in Cambridge." "Mark," said David, looking straight into his eyes, "don't you think you've been through enough? You deserve someone looking after things for you now, at least until this whole thing resolves itself." "Well, I think it's a great idea," chipped in Rosemary. "This thing's obviously got to be sorted out once and for all, or none of us will rest." Mark and Jane had certainly not intended for this problem to have overflowed to involve the rest of the family at the house, but conversation became difficult to limit to just David, and some explanation was necessary for Rosemary and Alice to allow them to know some of it, but not the awful central truth of the matter. It would only have caused unnecessary worry, something Mark certainly didn't want for his mother.